But I must say, I was blown away. It's fantastic. It's one of the best trips I've done, and I've done over 130 countries around the world.
Carl, thank you for joining Dykkerskap TV today, and we're going to look at some exotic holidays, in particular Antarctica. Why would anyone want to go to Antarctica?
Well, you know, that's a good question. It's cold and it can be quite rough down there. When I went there, I was sort of thinking, oh, this is exotic opportunity, maybe there's something cool there. But I must say, I was blown away. It's fantastic. It's one of the best trips I've done, and I've done over 130 countries around the world.
Wow.
The exciting thing about Antarctica is the vistas. I mean, it's just such a grand place. And you feel like, you know, as humans, we're really not so significant in the larger scheme of things. I mean, this photo here shows you a few small dots in the bottom, and they are actually penguin colonies. There are thousands of penguins in that photo. And what we're getting an opportunity to do now, which we didn't do before, is to go on some really nice ships that have been purpose-built for going to Antarctica.
So how do people go about booking a trip to Antarctica and sitting back and thinking, okay, let's go to Antarctica? How do you kind of do that?
So there's actually a few different companies that organize trips. So some of the recent ones actually have come up with purpose-built ships, but there's also a number of old research vessels that are doing the trip. So depending on your budget, you can go for the high end or you can go for somewhat lower end options. All of them take you probably at least 10 days to go down there. Some of them would be more than 2 weeks, depends a little bit on what kind of...
2 weeks to get there, and where are you leaving from?
Well, not necessarily to get there, but the whole trip. I think you normally leave from Ushuaia, which is in Patagonia in Argentina. Punta Arenas, which is on the other side in Chile, is also sometimes a departure point. And a little bit goes out of Christchurch in New Zealand. But I would think the vast majority go from Ushuaia in Argentina.
So talk us through the trip a little bit. What kind of happens? What sort of things do you do? Do you get off the boat and explore around in Antarctica a little bit?
So normally the first thing you do is go through the Drake Passage. Now this for many people is maybe a turn off because you can have pretty heavy waves. Sometimes it's 3 or 4 meters, so it's quite an exciting trip. However, it's well worthwhile. So if it's a fast ship, maybe it takes you 24 hours. It's a little bit rougher. It might take you 2 days or something like that. Once you're down there, a lot of the trips go to the Antarctic Peninsula. The reason for that is that it's a little bit more accessible than other parts of Antarctic. The ice is not always there, so you can get into many more bays and islands and things. It's also varied. You have volcanoes, you have the Antarctic Peninsula, you have inlets, you have all kinds of different historical stations, for example. So it has lots of different things to look at.
Is anyone living in Antarctica? Do you meet any locals or not really?
Well, in fact, there's been a few countries that have claimed they have people living permanently, including a few children that actually were born down there. This was more in order for countries to claim these areas, but the reality is there's no real permanent population. A number of these bases are year-round, so from that perspective you could argue that you have people there, but normally no one has to live in the base for much more than a year or so. Okay, in case maybe you have rare occasions where people are there for more than one season, but more often than not you have a turnaround.
And tell me a bit about your own personal experiences of going. Did you enjoy it?
I thought it was fabulous. I mean, I really enjoyed it. I mean, we saw so many fantastic things. There's of course lots of penguins and lots of different behavior which you've never seen before. Many different interesting seals. There are, you know, lots of fun photo opportunities if you like to do that type of thing. Many different types of whales. But just looking at the icebergs and the various sort of formations and the large landscapes, I mean, it really puts humans in a perspective which you might not see if you're in a capital or in urban areas your whole life.
Let's talk a little bit about money. How much are we talking about to get, like, the process of getting there and the cost as well?
So first you need to fly down to southern Argentina. I think if you're going in economy, maybe you can get away with 1,500 to 2,000 francs, dollars, something like that. And then on top of that, of course, you have to then buy the ticket going down there. And they can vary quite a lot. I would say probably lower end, somewhere around 2,000 to 3,000, up until more than 10,000, depending on the service and the cabin and things you have. But I think it's well worth it. It's not a trip you're going to do every week, but it's certainly a fantastic one. I think for people who've not been out of the beaten track so much, this is sort of a light version, because on the one hand you have fantastic service and excellent food, but on the other hand you actually see wilderness that very few people would have an opportunity to see.
Mm-hmm. Obviously, with your position at your company, you're heading up. Is there a lot of conservation work going on, and can you kind of get involved in that while you're there as well? And kind of
so, I mean, the fantastic thing is we are now on the beginning of a major set of conservation efforts for the Antarctic. This past year, the park in the Ross Sea was declared. It's going to be effective at the end of this year. This is an area the size of France and Spain put together, or for Americans, it's the size of Texas. So it's a pretty large area. And now we're on the discussion of a number of new areas also, including here in the Antarctic Peninsula. I think if you're really interested in this topic, there's lots of things you can do to help, both in terms of research to better understand what's happening with penguins, for example, particularly in the face of climate change. Now we're seeing some dramatic shifts already in terms of the temperatures down in Antarctica and what it has to do with the livelihoods of these, the possibilities for penguins to survive. So that's quite an interesting one also. Of course, whaling has traditionally had a huge impact, and we saw earlier some of these photos of barrels that they used to be boiling whale blubber in.
Oh, wow.
Now, the whale populations are recovering reasonably well, most of them. So there's a good story there, but there's still a lot of work to be done in terms of understanding it better.
And just to finish off, you mentioned some memories of traveling there, but just to finish off, what's the best thing about Antarctica?
I think for me, it was really seeing all the ice formations. It sounds really bland, but I thought ice can be fantastically beautiful, and it's actually really exciting being out in these little zodiacs and zooming around these things, and suddenly there's a penguin that pops out of the water, or there's a elephant seal that's walling on the beach, or it really is a very exciting and special place.
And the penguins are quite friendly?
They're very friendly, yes. Overall, everything is very friendly down there. I had no bad experiences.
Carl, thank you very much.
Thank you.
And thank you for watching. And if you like this interview and would like to see more, head over to dukascopy.tv.